You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Welcome to the 602 Club, TFM's local watering hole, and I am just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is pretty much every single week, is the one and the only Christy Morris. Christy, how are you doing this week? How was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, it was fantastic, actually. Thank you. I got to see my niece and nephew after a long absence, so that was really nice. How about you?
It was good. I also saw, well, there were only nieces there because my brother-in-law and sister-in-law only have girls, 5 of them to be exact.
Oh, that's a lot.
But it was fun. We had a great time. The Cowboys lost. It was great. So it just always phenomenal. And the food was fantastic. So, and I've had more dessert in like the last week than I've had all year. And the scale shows it. So let's get on to something else. This week we're going to be covering something really exciting, and back for the first time, and I think maybe a couple of years on the TFM network, is the illustrious, nay, the wonderful Tristan Riddell. Tristan, it is so good to have you back.
It's like coming home, and but you felt like everything was a lot bigger in your memory.
That's true. It's gotten a lot smaller here in the 602 Club, but that could be how much you've had to drink tonight. So,
No, it's fantastic to come back, and you and I have, of course, continued to be in contact, and we're on a separate network together. But yeah, it's been a while since I have been on 602 and been on Trek FM, and yeah, it's good to be back, and thank you for inviting me back, and where our schedules have actually lined up.
I know, and I knew just the poison to lure you back with, because we've talked about this behind the scenes together, as we text and whatnot. We've talked about The Mask of Zorro, and how much that we like this movie, and so I knew that when it came out on 4K and I got it, I was like, I know there's only one person who needs to be on this episode, and it's Tristan. So I'm really excited that we're going to dive into this one together. Before we get to talking about the movie, just want to thank you everybody for listening. Of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We got, Apple Podcasts. Give us a star rating review. Definitely helps the show grow. But honestly, we're all over the place with like Spotify and Amazon Music. And I mean, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find the 602 Club. And we continue to grow by leaps and bounds this year. So thank you so much to everybody for checking us out. Of course, we're on Twitter now at the 602 Club, and you can find us on Instagram, or you can follow us there as well at the 602 Club TFM. Of course, got Trek FM, the website, and then we've got the listeners only discussion group, the Babel Conference. You can find on Facebook. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So pretty much anywhere you want to go, we are there. And of course, you can always send us an email too over at trek.fm/contact. Christy and I enjoy getting emails, and maybe you have some ideas for things you'd like to hear us talk about coming up next year. Who knows if movie theaters will ever be open again? So we're just rolling with the punches, and get an opportunity to talk about cool things like this. Want to say a quick thank you to our associate producers, Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, Ryan Millett, and Daniel Noah, for supporting us through Patreon. We really appreciate all of the support we get through Patreon. It means that we bring all the podcasts that we do here on the network to you ad-free. So if you appreciate what we do, and we could always use your help. We can definitely use your help. So go to patreon.com/TrekFM and see how you can be part of the team. There's some great contribution levels, but honestly, in the end, every little bit makes a difference. So go to patreon.com/TrekFM. So guys, this was something that was really interesting to me because I feel like for all of my life, I've known who Zorro is. But I did not realize that Zorro's kind of like in many ways the original. Like, before Superman, before any of the comic book heroes hit the stage, like Zorro is one of those first big pulpy things to just really hit. And I mean, it's all the way back in 1919. So I honestly just could not believe that this character has endured that long, to the point that, it's been in over 40 films and 10 TV series. And I was just astounded by the staying power of a character like this.
Yeah, I think actually it's really cool to then see where things like Batman possibly came from, or then even he especially makes me think of the Dread Pirate Roberts in Princess Bride. It's almost the exact same outfit. But yeah, it's something that's sort of always been around that I think maybe people forgot about, because for a long time there was this absence of him in like popular culture. But, it goes all the way back to the early 1900s for Zorro. I remember seeing clips of the show from the 50s and hearing that music in my head again. But it's really cool to see that it lasted that long, sort of like we've felt about things like Bond here, and then gotten this revival that feels like is really paying tribute to the original.
This was something that I grew up with Zorro. There was a TV show on the Family Channel in the 90s that I absolutely loved. It was super cheesy. It was super weird. And I just
you're really selling it, Tristan.
No, it's I'm describing it perfectly, because it is worth your time. I think that like Adam West was a guest star at one time. Like it keeps that pulpy atmosphere. Like it's the lead is not Antonio Banderas, and it is it's one of those things where it just feels like a warm blanket sometimes. And like I had such fond memories, like going over to my grandparents' house and watching it with them together. And so I was always kind of around it. And then when I went to film school, we analyzed the Douglas Fairbanks version. And then, like of course that was well after the Antonio Banderas one came out, but this movie specifically, was the Antonio Banderas version. My family was obsessed with it. Like we absolutely loved it. Like we had the VHS, we got the Super Bit DVD, and it was practically just in the VCR all the time. Like there was no reason to take it out, because like that's how much we watched it. And
wow.
I still, when I hadn't watched it for years, and then when I got the 4K version, I got to the credits and I was like, oh, right, the credits song. And I remembered every single lyric to the end credits song of the movie. Yeah. So this is,
That's
and
awesome.
also like, and Christy, you were talking about Dread Pirates Roberts. Growing up, my favorite superheroes were Zorro and then, Batman. And I was obsessed with Dread Pirates Roberts. So I definitely have a type for my heroes.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up.
He likes them dark and wearing black.
With a mask.
It's like in what was it, Lego Batman, where he's like, "There's only one color, it's black, and maybe dark gray." Well, and it's funny because I was just thinking about you're talking about all of these characters to which Zorro has really kind of helped, I think, create or be an influence on, and in this movie specifically, but even in the past, his use of a bullwhip, that's where we got Indiana Jones bullwhip from. It has to be,
and maybe Catwoman
because they
too.
even use it in very similar ways to escape things and that kind of stuff, or to fight off villains, and so I think it's really fascinating to see that. This is a character who lives in the mindset of so many people that we loved, that created things that we loved, and it helped influence. And I think you're absolutely right, Christy. It had to have helped influence, Batman and, Indiana Jones and all of these type of things. And I think, it is fascinating to me that not only was this a, popular pulp character in magazines and then later in little novellas, but it is the thing that I think jumps off the silent screen and becomes one of the biggest stars of the silent screen because of Douglas Fairbanks. And so, like Tristan, you talk about analyzing that in film school, it's still something that people look back at because it was such a phenomenon. And again, it's funny because I'm sure when you think about the pulp serials that somebody like a Spielberg grew up with or a Lucas grew up with or those type of people, like these are the films that they're growing up with, and that are a part of their cultural zeitgeist to help them create things. So to me, it's just fascinating because I'll have to say, rewatching this movie, it's like Zorro is a character to which allows you to tell some still really relevant tales. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of disappointed that there were only 2 movies in this series because I feel like you could have had, at least a good trilogy out of it. And I haven't seen the second one since it came out, so maybe we'll have to talk about that one at a later time. Man. What'd you say, Tristan?
It's rough, man. The sequel.
Oh, really? Oh, man, that's so sad. I didn't remember it being bad. So
it's not even in the same league. We're talking about like New York Yankees versus T-ball in comparison. It's so bad.
Man.
So maybe we shouldn't.
Well, I guess we'll let it go then. But so yeah, to me, that was, as I was kind of just reading and back, and I was even watching the extras that came, and it was an old extra that was probably on the original DVD, Tristan, that I was watching, that you've probably seen 100 times. But like, this movie stems out of the people who hold Zorro's trademark of wanting to create a new Zorro film. And I think it's really interesting because unlike many movies, this movie could have been very different. And so I wanted to ask you guys about this. A couple of big differences. One would have been the director. They wanted Robert Rodriguez, and he was going to direct this film. And so I'm really interested to hear how you feel like that might have gone, especially since many of his films, especially at that time, had been known for being kind of like much more violent than what we get, here in this movie, which is very much, I would say, a cartoon style violence.
Well, if I remember correctly, I think that was the reason why Robert Rodriguez didn't stay on the film, because the studio didn't agree with his take on it, because he wanted to do an R-rated Zorro. He wanted a violent, bloody Zorro tale, which I think could have been done. Do I think? And I think Robert Rodriguez would have done it well. I mean, when you look at his filmography, he very much can tell the Mexican tale, and I think it would have been really cool and pretty great to see. But would it have been appropriate for the source material? I don't know. I don't know, because like when I think Zorro, I think Kitty. I think I think fun action and something that the family can watch together. And Rodriguez is not always that. Sometimes he can do that, like when we see with Spy Kids and stuff like that. But what he wanted to do was a little over the top of what the studio was comfortable with. And I think they ultimately made the right decision personally, because I really like Campbell's work, or some of Campbell's work, and I think he knocked it out of the park with this one.
Come on.
Oh man, poor Green Lantern.
Yeah, it was. This one I think struck the perfect tone, and this was one of those things where, like, when I watched it in preparation for this podcast, and then the silhouette of Zorro comes on and does the swipe of the Z, and then we go into the movie. I'm like, damn it, I missed the 90s. Man, this like, you just don't get these kind of family action films anymore. They just don't make them like this anymore. And I know that I'm being nostalgic because I grew up in the 90s and I was born in the 80s, but it just, if we gotten, I really like Rodriguez's work, but we wouldn't have gotten this if Rodriguez made the film.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Also grew up in the 90s, so there's that. But yeah, I will agree and say I think that it's definitely a much different movie in a good way because of who we get. And I think that it needed to, because of the hero that Zorro is before we get this movie, that it does need to have that element that's a little bit more family friendly. I think that if you had gone too far into violent, I think it's got enough violence for me showing the Murrieta brothers' head in a jar.
Right, yeah. Which actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a true story.
Oh, the fact that people did that, disturbing. But I think that it's still got just enough aside from that makes it more capable of being that classic hero, that swashbuckler that people really love and identify with and romanticize in stories. So I think it needed to lean that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the thought process of like, you know, do you basically want this to be Desperado or Sin City? You know, it is a really good question, and I think I think at the time, you know, when I'm thinking about when this movie is made in 98, I think this is really before a lot of those. I mean, Quentin Tarantino is definitely something that's in the background in the sense of like that's an acquired taste. You know, he's not the Quentin Tarantino we think of now. You know, where so many more people would go to see those type of movies. And I just don't think Zorro necessarily lends itself to being that type of movie. I think they make the right choice in not having him as director. It's funny, too, because one of the reasons that he leaves is because of budgetary reasons. They don't want to give him more than $40 million, $41 million, I think, to make the movie. And the movie goes over budget to $60 million. So it's funny that one of the reasons that he leaves actually... You know, unfortunate for the movie makers in, you know, everybody behind the scenes, it ends up costing a lot more than they think it's going to. But hey, I think it's money well spent. I'll definitely say that. Now this is a really interesting question too, because so with Robert Rodriguez, Sean Connery was signed on to be the older Zorro. And so how do you think that would have worked as opposed to what we got with Anthony Hopkins?
Was he signed on or was he just asked?
I feel like I was reading in that he was signed on to do it. And he backs out, I think, once Rodriguez leaves. So, but that's something to me that was like really fascinating because obviously he would have, you know, I mean, a year later he works with Catherine Zeta-Jones in Entrapment, and I feel like, I mean, the role would have been similar, but I mean, Sean Connery brings a whole other feel to the movie.
Yeah, there's something about. I know that there's a lot of question on what roles people can play depending on heritage and ethnicity, and I know that there's some middle ground with this particular kind of role because there are white, you know, Spanish people. There are, you know, like in ambiguous ethnicities with Hispanic individuals and everything like that. And I say all that to preface, even though Anthony Hopkins is Welsh. I think he can sell coming from Spanish heritage more than Sean Connery, which is funny to say because he played Ramirez in Highlander.
That's what I was gonna say.
It's just even though the man has the filmography to say, yeah, I can totally, like, what is this haggish? You know, like I know. Yeah. I just don't think, even though he barely. I can say, I was going to say he barely pulled it off in Highlander. He didn't pull it off in Highlander. He wouldn't have pulled it off in Zorro. And I think Anthony Hopkins, who spent some time in the sun and the tanning booth, you know, to get that Californian sun, played it a lot better than what Sean Connery would have done with his, 6'2" self and with his accent that, you know, he wouldn't have gotten rid of.
Because he can't. I mean, it's not like he really can.
Yeah.
I mean, he was Russian, for gosh sakes, and sounded just like he always does.
Yeah, he's like, I'm Diego de la Vega. You know, like it doesn't roll off the tongue. Like there are times when like Antonio Banderas says, Don Rafael, and he says it so fast, it doesn't even sound like 3 syllables. It sounds like 1.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. That's so funny that you mentioned that, Tristan, because I was exactly going to say that when he does Ramirez, they get the look right, but everything else is just not quite believable. So, although, you know, I'm a pretty diehard Connery fan, I think that this role wasn't quite right for him. And you were right, Matt. I saw it said he was cast originally
Crazy.
as Zorro.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think if Sean, like if we actually got Sean Connery in this movie and say that they got Catherine Zeta-Jones, I don't think Entrapment would have happened the same way. I don't
Yeah.
think Catherine
Yeah,
Zeta-Jones
you're
would have
right.
been in Entrapment.
Yeah.
Because
I
that
think
would have
you're
been
absolutely right.
too weird. That would have been like stunt casting, where like in the previous movie they were father-daughter, and in this movie they're love interest. I mean, that Entrapment already got enough heat for for the age difference. I don't think they would have added that
It
eerie
definitely had enough
cinematic.
heat.
You know, I'm searching for an appropriate word, but no.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tristan, for keeping it family friendly.
But yeah, I do think that they get a good look going for Anthony Hopkins, especially with that like pencil thin mustache and the long hair and
Flynn.
yeah, they've got him in his V-neck flowy pirate shirts. I think that he too plays off well having a Spanish accent. I think they probably, I'm sure I somewhere heard that they had a good dialect coach.
Yeah, I really loved it when Don Rafael came, like in the first act, at the end of the first act, when Rafael comes into his home and he says, "The governor in my home. What an honor." You know, like just like the way that he just like changes into Bruce Wayne, you know, like and just kind of like tries to kick it into gear and like lets it. He's like, "You'll stay for dinner, of course." You know, like it's still Anthony Hopkins, but he adds that little Spanish aristocratic flair to his tongue, and it really, I think, comes off really well.
I mean, I think you guys nailed it, though. The problem is that Sean Connery just couldn't pull this off in the way. I mean, he just couldn't. And I love Sean, obviously. I'm a huge fan of Sean Connery's. You know, I mean, Hunt for October is one of my favorite movies. I love, him in Indiana Jones. He was, the best Bond, except for Diamonds Are Forever, and we'll forget that one.
Hey, now.
And Never Say Never Again. We'll definitely forget that one. Sorry, Nick. So he doesn't have what it takes. And I think, like you said, Tristan, one of the things about Anthony Hopkins is he has enough of a chameleon about him that he can kind of become whatever he's going to play. And I think they just cast somebody who could look Spanish, and one of the pluses for this movie, it's the first time ever somebody who is actually Spanish plays Zorro, so they were going to have that in the film. And Antonio Banderas said that on the extras, that this was the very first time somebody actually Spanish played. So that's what he said on the extras that I just watched last night. So if that's wrong, it's Antonio Banderas' fault. So I will blame Antonio Banderas. How do you say? Yes, sure.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's so interesting how different this movie could have been. And I think, one of the things that makes this work so well, Tristan, you alluded to this earlier, is that we get Martin Campbell kicking off another franchise. He had just come off of doing GoldenEye, and he actually says no to Tomorrow Never Dies so that he can do Zorro, because he didn't want to do 2 Bond movies in a row. And what's fascinating, and is in many ways, he uses kind of a similar formula that he did with GoldenEye to tell the story, where the beginning of the movie is the history, and the rest of the movie builds off of that. And everything that he adds to the film here, I think in his direction, is just phenomenal. And so,
Yeah.
And apparently Tristan just texted me. Thank you for this, Tristan. That he is not
I tried to do it on the sly. So
yeah,
that,
no.
so
I'm gonna correct myself here. Contrary to the false claims that Antonio Banderas makes, sorry, Antonio Banderas, but he's not the first Spanish actor to portray Zorro. So there were many before him. So he was definitely not the first. Sorry, Antonio Banderas. I apologize if this is the first time you're hearing this news.
No, he's a liar, clearly. So.
Yeah. But I mean, to me, Martin Campbell really kills it with the direction in this film. And it's because of him and like him kind of taking the formula he used with GoldenEye. It works perfectly with reintroducing the world to this character. And it's fun in all the places it needs to be fun. It's kind of sexy in all the places it needs to be sexy. And like, I mean, I'm beside myself the fact that, that this works as well as it does. And I really do think it comes down to him and what he does behind the camera, what he does with just everything about what he did in this movie. I couldn't say enough about.
Well, and do you see some similarities, like I do now that we're throwing in, he recently came off GoldenEye, between Miss Onatopp and Catherine Zeta-Jones' character?
There is a little bit of that. Like, she has...
that fieriness.
She definitely has... Yeah. Like, she's much more involved in the story, and like, I think that's a great part of this film, is they give her character a lot more to do. She's much more proactive. And she does kind of have this, like, I think it's part of just Catherine Zeta-Jones as well as Famke Janssen just kind of ooze awesomeness,
Yeah. I just, I'm wondering if, how much of that is direction from Campbell, too.
I mean, that's a good question.
I think one of the best things about this film is the pacing. It is, and I give credit to Campbell for that, and Tom Noble for editing it. There's really no moment in the film where I feel like it's wasted. I really feel like there's no moment where I'm just like, I could fast forward this, or I could skip this, or this could be excised, or anything like that. It's just it allows you to breathe when you need to breathe. It entertains you when it needs to entertain you. It amps you up. It intrigues you. And it goes by in nothing flat. It feels like it's a short film, but it's not. And that's a beautiful thing for a movie, when you're just like, when you just want more, and you're happy that it's over because it was such a good time, but you are sad that it's over because you want more. And then fast forward a couple of years and you're like, oh great, no, that's not what I was talking about. That's not what I was talking about. But yeah, I think that's one key thing for me when I watch movies is, how good is the pacing, and is there anything that could be excised? And in my opinion, there's nothing that needs to be removed in this.
I'm with both of you. I think that it definitely, especially in the scenes with a lot of stunt work, and when we're going, back and forth with the romance scenes as well, I think that it all ties together really well, and you can tell that the talent that Campbell brings to GoldenEye is the same here. That it, like you're saying, Tristan, nothing could be cut, and it continually gives you interesting things that are captivating you along the way. And then throwing in a little grossness here and there too, with the head in a jar and people getting beheaded. And
well, and there's Tristan, along with the fact that, because you made this joke earlier about how they don't make movies like this like they did in the 90s, but there's this incredible sense of fun with the film, like that and I think sometimes to the detriment of certain films these days, it's like they take themselves so seriously that there's no fun in them whatsoever. And I really see this movie, like you talked about the pacing, but I think the tone of it, consistent tone, it knows when to take the moments it needs to seriously between the characters. Like, when you have that conversation between Banderas and Hopkins about, he's going to go, try to save his daughter. And he's like, I would guess you don't owe anybody anything anymore, and they have that really intense moment. And like, so we're able to do these type of things. And even just like you said, Chrissy, the action sequences and the way they play out, the way they're structured, the way they move, everything is working here. And I think that just comes down to, Campbell just was absolutely the right pick. I think and especially since really this is kicking off another franchise in the same way that he did with Bond. And it's like you want to find the essence of that character and you want to give it to the audience. And I think that's kind of what I get here is that this movie is the essence of Zorro. That sounds like a fragrance. The essence of Zorro from Antonio Banderas.
So with you talking about tone, in like the balance of humor, I mean, that's a big thing in this movie is the balance of humor. Because this could be, okay, and also, okay, what I'm about to say, I don't want to get any tweets. I don't want to get any letters because I'm a Marvel fan. I like Marvel movies. I'm a big MCU fan, but I do believe
I can attest, folks. I know behind the scenes, Tristan is a big Marvel fan.
I am. I'm like, even though Batman is in my heart and soul, and I'm a DC boy, I still love the MCU and Marvel films and everything like that. But there are times when it can get too jokey, way too jokey. I think they lean into that. And obviously not to their detriment because, I mean, tons and tons and tons of people like these movies and it makes a lot of money. But from my perspective, I think it can be a gross tonal shift when you're just like, it's quip after quip after quip after quip after quip after quip after quip, followed by some action. Maybe somebody dies. There's a single tear, quip, 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 quip. But while I was watching this recently, I kept thinking, this is what Marvel wants to be. This is what, in tonality, like when they go for the joke, I think this is what, let me rephrase, maybe this is what Marvel should be like with their action, drama, and comedy mixture. I think this would be, maybe this is what we'll get in phase 4 or 5, whatever we're in. But as I was watching this, I was like, this is a Marvel movie before there was Marvel movies, like before there was MCU. Let me rephrase that. Like, this is a Marvel movie before there was the MCU. And it's just, you have a great origin story. It's a pass the baton story to a new origin, and it's funny, it's sexy, it has tons of action. It's got really popular leads, but you don't think it's a comedy, even though it's very funny. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head because there's even the moments where there are jokes in this movie. It's not quippy jokes. It's more you settle in and have yourself a giggle. You have to get the joke rather than it being right on the tip of your tongue. I think that even there's the moments where they have the more serious. I keep coming back to the meetings between Banderas and Captain Love. It's like they're kind of joking with each other, but it's more sarcastic, and you can tell the tension of the scene. So I like that they don't make it too at all, leaning towards slapstick or anything like that. It's really like subtle.
One of my favorite jokes in the entire movie is when they're in the confessional and she says, I had impure thoughts about a man. And he goes, huh? Like, it just like, he just gives a little faint shock, and it gets me rolling, and that's all it takes. It's just like Antonio Banderas giving a little faint, huh? And I'm in stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I really like what you're saying, Tristan. To me, this kind of harkens back to what we did see in maybe very early Marvel too, where Iron Man. Because Iron Man has those moments, right, where everything is super serious and like things are pretty awful, especially at the beginning of the movie when he's in the cave. There's not a lot that's funny in that, and there's a lot of that movie where you you're able to make that shift tonally and it feel like the wave that it should. And I think you're just absolutely right. It just goes to show, I mean, this is a great script, and you got a fantastic director. And then I think, honestly, they just pulled out the perfect cast. I mean, Antonio Banderas is so funny in this movie, but then he's also to be able to be so serious. I mean, that moment where he watches Captain Love shoot the guy that's flying towards them, and it's the guy he used to work with. And, he bends down and he watches him die. And they have that, moment where they lock eyes. And it's like, it's so heartbreaking. And he plays it so well and so subtly. Like, there's not a ton of movement, but it's all just happening in his face. And it's just, he was amazing. And I mean, obviously the absolute perfect character, a perfect person to play this character. And to boot, Bob Anderson, who has trained a ton of people in film for swordplay, rated Banderas the best natural talent he's ever worked with for on-screen fencing. So that's pretty high praise.
He's also apparently an excellent horseman, and he did a lot of the riding himself. Now, like when you in the 4K version, this was sadly very apparent, but like when like he does the jumps and flips off the horse and everything like that, it's clearly somebody else. They didn't even get somebody who was the same weight as Banderas to do the horse jumps. And it's, yeah, but one thing, actually, this is kind of a tangent. But speaking of like, seeing the 4K version, in the dance scene, in the really sexy dance scene, where there's where they're like dancing like they're in Madrid. In the wide shots, it's clearly not Antonio Banderas, which is really weird because
he's a good dancer.
He's a great dancer. And so I'm like, why did they do this? Like, and so all that I can think of is that maybe they forgot to get the wide shot and they had to go back for reshoots and Banderas wasn't available, or maybe it was a second unit thing. I'm not quite sure, but it was really weird to see for the first time because like on it, like when, like growing up, it was on a VHS on a 27-inch screen if I was lucky. Like there's no way to tell that in the wide shot it wasn't Banderas, but now I could tell. And it was just strange to me to see that. Anyway. Back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to add because I actually didn't know that and I haven't seen it in the 4K version. So thank you for sharing that. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe it's a lot easier to tell when it's in 4K though. But yeah, I wouldn't think that, especially because I know that he's a good dancer and because the way that they pull off the scene, it seems like it's him the entire time.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so good, though. And I mean, one of the things that I marvel at him with is just how he's able to transition. Chrissy, you were mentioning those scenes when he's just talking specifically to Captain Love in the office, and then those scenes when he's being really goofy, especially kind of at the beginning, where he's challenging Hopkins Don de la Vega to a fight, and he just looks drunk. Like an absolute fool, and he just does both so well, and that's a great range to be able to have for this character, and to kind of watch him move from the buffoon to this person that has the refinement too was really well done as well. So he just plays all of those parts perfectly.
Absolutely. I think that they picked somebody who not only can pull off the look, but has the skills to then come in and do all of these things that would normally, possibly take a stunt person for a lot more. And he can pull that off even at the end as caring father. He's now not only the romantic interest or the, goofy drunk, but he's also now moved on to becoming a more, mature human being married probably and having a child. And you can see how it could possibly go on to be a bigger franchise because of the way he plays off the end. And I think that it definitely has to be the first time for sure that every woman all over the world that saw this movie went, Antonio Banderas. I mean, come on.
I think that's probably true.
It has to be the best Banderas movie out there.
I think you're right. I mean, it probably is my favorite of his movies. But we talked a little bit about Anthony Hopkins, but to me, the role that he's playing here is almost that Obi-Wan Kenobi role. He is the Alec Guinness to this movie who really adds all the gravitas you need to the role that somebody's trying to live up to. And I just, again, I think he was the perfect choice. And I love his portrayal in this movie, but I also love that, he talked about specifically in the extras where he was like, you know what, I've done a ton of great work. I've done a ton of movies. He's like, I don't want to downplay this, but it's time for me to have some fun. And I love that he came here to have fun, and it totally comes off perfectly with this role because he is having a great time. His joke where he's like, this is going to take a lot of work. It's so dry. It's so perfect. And I love it. And I think he adds so much to the role, and I couldn't say more of how glad I am that it's him in this role and not somebody else.
Speaking of which, something that really kind of I'm trying to phrase it appropriately. Where Don Rafael Montero, I think Stuart Wilson doesn't get enough credit for portraying the antagonist here, and I think he does a fantastic job. And I'm always every time I watch it, I'm always taken aback by how well his swordplay is. Because I always forget that he is that good at fencing and at fighting, because he kind of just plays off this aristocrat who you'd think that would just get his butt kicked, but then he just comes out of nowhere and just around the corner in the hallway, and he's just slashing away. Mm-hmm. But when I found out that Armand Assante had initially been, cast in the role, part of me was just like, oh man, that would have been good. That would have been cool. I really think, because I just feel like the world doesn't get enough Armand Assante. And what do you guys think about Wilson playing the role, and what do you think about Assante possibly of playing the role?
So I felt like Wilson was so good. Because he's the only one I've ever seen in the role, and the way that he does it, especially playing back and forth as the villain, but the, doting father who just wants the best for his daughter and for California. And, he's portraying himself as the savior of California. I think I like what we get.
It's a great question, Tristan. It really is, because I do think, he could have been really good. He would be able to play the menace, I think, even better. But I think one of the things that you kind of mentioned about Stuart Wilson that I think he brings to the role is that he truly plays believing that he's doing this for the best of everybody. Really well. And it's only in those really key moments where I think that the complete facade slips and he lets that true self shine of really this is about him and having more power. But he's almost convinced himself that this is really for the people, and he's almost convinced himself that that's exactly what he wants. And so, I don't know. It's a great question because, unlike Connery, I think Armand could have been just as fantastic in the role, and he just would have, I think, brought us a bit more menace to it, honestly.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it would have been, I think he probably would have brought a little bit more intensity to the role, and that's not an insult to Wilson. So have you guys seen, have either of you seen The Odyssey, the TV movie that Assante was in, and that's why he wasn't in in Zorro?
No,
I have not.
It's really worth your time. It's very 90s TV movie, but I really enjoy it. I got it on I had it taped on VHS from TV for years, and then a couple years ago I got it on a double pack DVD with that and Gulliver's Travels.
Oh,
with,
nice. Okay.
Ted Danson.
Classic.
Nice.
So you could probably find it in the Walmart bin for like $4. So look there next time you're there.
Yeah, no. So we've kind of talked around her, but how did you guys feel about Catherine Zeta-Jones and the fact that Elizabeth Scorpio, I don't know how you say her last name, Isabella, who was in Goldeneye, actually, she's one of the people who tested for the role, which was interesting choice, since she had been in Goldeneye. Anyway, yeah, I mean, Catherine Zeta-Jones, go.
I think Catherine Zeta-Jones is one of those actresses where every movie she's in, she's perfect for the role because it's Catherine Zeta-Jones. I have an unabashed love for Zeta-Jones. It's hard for me to be impartial. And it's hard for me to say like it could have been better or maybe not. I was just like, if she fails in her performance, then that means the movie has failed her.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing. But yeah, I thought the accent was a little was a little different. I do want to ask you guys one thing though. As I'm watching this movie, I don't know why this is the first time it occurred to me, but so Catherine Zeta-Jones was raised in Spain. All right, raised in Spain. She comes to California's shores, and she goes to the bazaar, like to the marketplace, and she sees her old nanny, and her nanny's speaking Spanish. Her nanny's daughter has to translate the Spanish to Catherine Zeta-Jones. Why? Why? What is that scene? What's going on there? She was raised in Spain and only got the accent? Like, what?
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I've always thought that because it doesn't make any sense. If she was raised in Spain, like you're saying, and her father clearly seems like he probably speaks Spanish regularly since he's interacting with all these different groups of people that would. And then she's coming over here with him as, a grown woman in her probably early 20s. She would know Spanish by now.
And also, I always just kind of assumed that they were all speaking Spanish and we were just hearing English, for the audience sake.
Oh, yeah, I get what you mean.
Because, like it's 1800s California, like they're going to be speaking Spanish. But yeah, it was, I don't know. It's either way, it just doesn't make sense.
But the only thing that I could think is that they didn't want to use subtitles at that point of the movie. And so that's why they do it. But it still doesn't make sense for the movie. In the reality of the movie that we put in, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
No.
But you just go with it.
Yeah. She's so great in the role, though. I mean, and mainly because her and Banderas have such chemistry together. I mean, it's just jumping off the screen, and you want to be with both of them. And so it's fantastic. And I mean, the only thing I could say is she's got the world's most magical hair because it grows like 6 inches just for one scene. It's impressive.
It's crazy how that works, right?
The magic of movie making.
Yeah, she went to the hairdresser and said, please give me the strategically placed haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really funny in the extras because she mentioned that she's talking to Campbell about that scene, and he's like, "Oh, and then it just all comes off." And she's like, "What? It all what?" And he's like, "Oh no, don't worry, nobody will see it." And she's like, "But people have freeze frame." So like, it's the time when actors are starting to think about that, and then she's like, "Then it was fine because I have really long hair." So
they could have given her something. I'm just thinking like, there's got to be something.
Yeah,
but anyway. Yeah,
and that shot was in every single trailer and TV spot.
And of course it was. I mean,
because that's motivation to get people to the
movies.
It wasn't as bad as the Into Darkness bikini shot, like that we saw in trailers. But
it's true.
It was really funny because you just knew that, like, yeah, this will get the get the people in.
But again, too, though, that's to your point, Tristan, like the perfectly placed humor. It was unexpected in the way it was going to happen still. So then when you actually get to that moment of seeing the fight and then that being the end of it, it's hilarious because she comes into it thinking, you know, she's got him beat. She's a better swords person than he is. And then it ends up that way. It's funny. But yeah, I think that you couldn't have had another actress play this character, especially alongside Banderas, and have that kind of chemistry and have the best word I have is that fire with her specifically, Catherine Zeta-Jones. I love the way that she plays all of her roles with a little bit of that fire and sassy nature or whatever you want to call it. And then I like too that she is able to play the soft moments where, you know, she's finally figuring out who her real father is. And then in the end, you know, when he's dying in their arms, and then being able to play the scenes with Banderas where they have that back and forth, especially with the dance, it's beautiful. And then also you can feel that heat in the moment too.
So what you're saying is it's hot, hot, hot.
No, I'm saying the heat of the moment, like Asia.
Oh, right. You know, the other person too that I always forget that's in this movie is Matt Lesher. And I love that he's in this movie because he's also he was in the DC TV shows and The Flash. He plays the Reverse Flash.
Good point.
And yeah, really, and he's so good at being evil. Like, and here he is just maniacally evil. Like, he's the one who he is the mustache twirling villain. And he plays it so perfectly. And I really, I also love too, you know, this is the place where he's a historical character that has been used in Zorro since the beginning. You know, Macaulay, used this character, and I think it's so fun. And I think that's one of the things that makes Zorro kind of special is there's this mixture between real life history and then pulp storytelling smashed together. And gosh, Harrison, I'm just always good when he gets the poetic justice of, I mean, it's just pure poetic justice when that gold comes slamming down on him. So he's died by the sword and by the gold he was trying to steal as well from all of these peasants. Just fantastic. I mean, it's great. He's great.
Oh man, like speaking of death scenes, like when Don Raphael gets his foot trapped and like he knows he's going to die, like he gets dragged for a good amount of time and he knows it's coming and it's going to be painful. And like that is even more terrifying to me than what Capitan Love went through. Just because you hear his screams and he's just continuing to drag it, and then all of a sudden, they die together, and then I think you even see Don Raphael's body kind of flail to the side, like after the gold kind of explodes everywhere. You see this like little clothed ragdoll body that just kind of goes boing.
Yep. Yeah, this viewing was actually the first time that I caught that particular piece of it, and it was even more funny. But you would think that Captain Love didn't have enough energy left in him since he had a sword through his middle anyway to scream, but he did.
Oh, in the movies, you have enough breath to give one last scream. I mean, just look at Braveheart.
Yeah.
It's really important, too. I mean, it's really important, folks. No, I think one of the things, too, that I really kind of liked about this movie is that, you know, there kind of is this theme running throughout the movie about how you're going to use your power, which is, you know, in some ways it's kind of like it goes along really well with like that Batman theme. You know, how is Bruce Wayne going to use all of this money and everything that he went through and the pain of the loss and that question. And I really liked how everybody in this movie they have a certain amount of power or they're being given a certain amount of power, and they're the ways they use it are very different, you know, and, you know, I love how, you know, you do see Don De La Vega, who is very keen on using all of the wealth he has for the betterment of others. Like, he's going to put his life on the line, just like Batman in that sense. And then Montero on the other side, you know, as I was saying earlier, it's all about for the people, but really it's just about him gaining more power. And this whole all these power dynamics, and it makes for just, I think, a really poignant story it's effervescent, and that's one of the things I love about it. It's like, it's so much fun, but it does have something to say as well. It's a really important lesson to keep being reminded of, is how we use the power we've been given.
Right. Well, definitely when you're talking about someone who's leading this group of all of the other Dons and everything, they're already not amazing people. That they kind of give off that vibe of they're all a little bit underhanded in how they got wealthy in the first place. But especially that he has convinced himself that he's doing something good. But he doesn't quite believe it 100%, because you can tell when he says, we're going to buy it from him, but with gold from his own land, that he knows what he's doing. And that he feels that accomplishment from being able to pull one over on somebody in that big of a way. So, yeah, I think that it's really cool to see how they show with him especially, and then also through, by contrast, Zorro, and with the two different versions of Zorro, we see that it's all about what you do with what you're given and not just where you are in society. And that, you know, even like the poor people, they're showing how the Dons are willing to use them for their means and then kill them all. And that Zorro's always been about helping the little guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that whole idea of, like, you know, just using other people for your own gain, in such a disgusting way, is a great lesson, and it's evergreen, you know, because it's not a problem that, I mean, it's been a problem that's been here since the beginning, and it continues to be a problem, and it's one we need to be reminded of over and over again, so we can see ourselves in the different places. You know, how we're using the power we have and the gifts we've been given. And the money that we have and the time that we have, how we're using all of that. Are we just using it for ourselves, or are we using it for the betterment of others? And so I just love it.
And that men will try to dance and women will succeed. I'm sorry, it had to be said.
Oh, man. For you guys, you know, this movie is an action movie. And so how do you feel like the action holds up after all of these years?
I think it absolutely holds up. I think I miss sword movies. I miss the swashbucklers, you know, like I really, really do. I mean, like in the 90s, some of my favorite action films, I guess I don't even want to say action films, like some of my favorite films are as Zorro, this film, and First Night with Sean Connery and Richard Gere. Because I friggin' love sword fights. I absolutely love them. And I know that we've gotten some Star Wars films recently, and I love lightsaber fights, but they're just not the same. It's just not the same as the clink and the clang and the shiny. And the stabby. It just doesn't work at the same way. And, like the explosions that they use and the how they, just all the tools that they give Zorro, where like he's a gymnast, a expert horseman, he is, you know, like he's a swashbuckler, and he can utilize a whip, and he can give a quip, and it just the way that they marry all of those elements into one hero, and you never get bored with these action scenes, and like they do a really good job of amping, you know, like upping the ante with every single scene to the point where it crescendos in gigantic explosions. And I don't know why 90s movies did this, but they would add in like a panther roar in some explosions. Have you guys noticed this?
Yeah,
Like,
they even talked about it in the extras that there is
did they?
it's like a it's like a panther, or it's one of those larger cats.
It's like a like
It makes an explosion sound bigger than it is, I guess.
it's so strange. It works for me. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know why they did it and why it was a trend, but it's there.
That's funny. I never caught that before, so now I need to go watch it again and listen carefully for the panther roar. But yeah, I think that the action and the dancing are the two best things about the movie. Because for sure, I mean, all those movies that remind you of the 90s, like Three Musketeers or Princess Bride or Robin Hood, you know, all of those have that in common with really great sword fighting and horse work and the ability to just, you know, come in, you know, swoop in, do something heroic, and then swoop out with your whip at your side and your faithful steed Tornado. You know, it's everything that you want in a hero and everything that you want to be if you got to be one. So I think that for sure the action holds up, and it gets you excited to want to rewatch the movie over and over again.
I grew up with the Errol Flynn movies, you know, like Robin Hood, those kind of things. And of course, known for their swordplay. And, you know, I'm so thankful that they got Bob Anderson to help them do all the sword work in this movie, because, you know, when he's involved, it's always good. And the fact that you have this caliber of people trying to pull off the sword work is fantastic. And I think you're absolutely right, Tristan. There isn't any of the action sequences that doesn't hold up in this movie. It all still works, and it all still feels great. And a part of that, too, is that you're in a place where it's all completely real still, too. There's no CGI work here, because that didn't really exist then in that way, to be able to augment things in the way you'd want, the way you can now. And like you said, even that massive explosion in the end, it's huge. It's huge. So I love it. And I think, you know, all that action comes down to, you know, they're filming all these scenes in Mexico. They're all on location. Again, it feels like we're back in that time. And so everything about the movie and the action, I think, still works. And everything about the production of the film still works in that way. Like, it looks so good. So I just think they do a fantastic job. And then on top of that, you add James Horner's score, which, man, this is such a good score. Such a good score. And Tristan, you even talked about you've got the great Mark Antony song at the end of the movie. I mean, it's just great stuff.
It's so recognizable too. Like those strings at the beginning, just that kind of, you know, flow and go up and down. Like, it's just the theme, you know, Zorro's theme of, like, when he comes into the square, and then when Banderas dons the mask for the first time. It's just, yeah, like, I can hear it right now. I don't even need to play it in my headphones.
You don't need to sing it for us either.
Well, that one I possibly could. I mean, that's going to be a special Patreon feature.
Oh, okay.
Later on is me singing that. It's a reverse thing where I give you money instead.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just so, you know, Horner is really good, and it's interesting. I was watching the movie last night to get ready, and there were a couple moments where I could hear other pieces. Like, I was like, oh, that's a little bit of a Star Trek refrain, and oh, that's kind of something that he'll, you know, he has a brave heart, and like but then, like you said, I think he just really nails this by using a lot of those things specific to Spain and Mexico, like when they're doing the sword play, and he's using the dance, the feet from the dance, and like that as the background. Like, he had to talk them into it. He even said too. Mm-hmm. It works really well because it creates this rhythmic feel as you know, the new Zorro is learning from the older Zorro, and but it feels so much the part, and it helps you, like, again, with the production and everything just looking so good, and it makes me feel like I'm back in that time period, although a lot cleaner, because everybody's really clean in this movie, in the sense that, like, nobody looks dusty, even though, you know, they're supposed to be in, like, Southern California at this point. So, yeah, I love it. I love the score. I've been listening to it for the last week, just enjoying it again. So
it's beautiful.
I mean, I don't know if I need to ask this question, but we do it. So, Tristan, if you had to rate The Mask of Zorro, what are you going to rate The Mask of Zorro?
This is an unabashed 5-star film for me. I know that some people reserve 5 stars for, you know, Citizen Kane, Godfather, and things like that, and I completely respect that, and I totally get it. And I'm not trying to say that The Mask of Zorro is like the Citizen Kane of action films, or of you know, like a mid-90s family action films. I'm not trying to say that. It's just, when I look at a film, I try to factor in the movie making, my own personal enjoyment, and is there anything that I would change. And in my own personal enjoyment, it's absolutely a 5-star film. In the movie making, when you look at the tone, the pacing, the script, the action, the dialogue, it all works. And we talked about this before, but is there anything I would change? There's not a single thing I would change. There's not a single thing I would excise or add in or move around. I think it's a great edit and it's a great direction. And so because of all that, I give it a nerdy, unabashed 5 stars.
I think that you're right on. I mean, this is another one that you may have heard if you've listened to our show lately, Tristan, that there's a lot of these that I've grown up watching with my dad. And this was another one that my dad and I watched very often, and something that has just been a part of me growing up, but then also something that I like to revisit from time to time, just because it's like that warm blanket. And so, yeah, I have to give it a 5 out of 5 as well, because really, when I think about it, there is nothing that I would change. I think that there's probably times when it feels a little bit like a cheesy 90s movie, but I still love it anyway. And I mean, how are you going to change that? So, yeah, I give it a 5 too.
Yeah, you know, I think I'm pretty much right there with you guys. You know, this is, for me, it's not quite 5, but it's 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Like, it's so good. Like, in fact, even just rewatching yesterday, it went up half a star, just because I was like, this movie's just so good. So, I really like this movie. And it's one that I'll continue to keep watching, because it really is just so much fun. And so I'm really excited, you know, that we got a chance to cover it together, and hopefully everybody will enjoy going back and rewatching it now. And so, but it is time for recommendations, and this is where the part of the show where we recommend something that we have been watching or listening to. And so, Tristan, what is something that you would like to recommend to everybody here on the 602 Club?
I really wish I could give something esoteric and give something hipster-like, where it's something that you've probably never heard of or anything like that. But honestly, I'm going to have to be a little basic here and say The Great British Bake Off is something that everyone should be watching.
Yes.
It is the salve in the wound that is 2020. It is, they went to great lengths to give us these episodes. Like, they all quarantined, had a quarantine bubble, and they tested, and they made sure that everything was cool and good to go. And it was just an absolute delight to turn on Netflix every Friday and snuggle in, and then just wonder if their bake was going to be undercooked or underproved. And it is the warm blanket. It is just pure. It is like the Nexus. It's joy, pure joy in a warm blanket. And it's what everybody needs right now. So that is my recommendation, is go to Netflix, watch The Great British Baking Show.
That has been like my bread and butter. I think I've watched every season multiple times.
Oh yeah, like my wife and I have seen it. She's seen it multiple times. I've seen it at least once through, and it's time to go back to collection 1 and start over again.
And now you can tell if things are overworked.
Overworked.
That's awesome.
Unapproved.
Yeah. My recommendation, when I was looking at other Catherine Zeta-Jones films that I love, one came up that I think I saw recently, is now on Hulu or Amazon Prime, so easy time to rewatch it if anyone wants to. But it's a 1996 movie called The Phantom, starring Billy Zane.
I freaking love that movie.
And
I just bought it like 2 weeks ago on digital.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that was another one around this era that I was watching nonstop with my dad. It's so good. It's kind of campy sometimes, but
sometimes,
yeah. And but it's got Treat Williams as the villain. There are pirates. It's so good. So I highly recommend
Drex. Begins and ends with the letter X.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! No, it sounds like me and my dad watch the same movies as you and your dad.
Yeah.
Because that was actually the first time that my dad and I ever saw Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Oh wow! Was the Phantom
in The Phantom? Because I remember she was laying on a couch and no one could see she was there until she moved, and then both my dad and I were just like, who is this individual?
Interesting.
This well symmetrical faced individual.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, so I have a really fun one to recommend to everybody this week. I am recommending The Art of Star Wars: The Mandalorian, the book that is coming out. And in fact, by the time this episode drops, the book will be out. But it is fantastic. Really, the art of books have kind of become the behind-the-scenes books for the Star Wars universe these days, and it's just so great. It's really well written. We've got some great behind-the-scenes material in there about the creation of the series, and then, of course, getting to peruse the artwork for the creation of this series is just phenomenal. Like, I mean, the Star Wars concept artists are just so good and so imaginative, and it's so much fun to look back at that first season and see how they came up with everything as they were trying to figure out what the show was, and really create the look and the feel of it. So I highly recommend picking up The Art of Star Wars: The Mandalorian, because you're not going to regret it, and honestly, kind of the perfect gift for any Star Wars fan. So definitely check that out. But Tristan, we're so glad to have you back here in the 602 Club. And so I know you have tons else going on. If people want to catch up with you, where can they find you?
Oh, what you can do is head on over to thenerdparty.com. It is a great place to be with. I have a lot of archive shows, and one show that I'm currently doing right now is called the House Lights series, where we, depending on which director we're analyzing, we just finished House of Fincher, and we're currently recording House of Nolan, and so everyone should go and check that out. And I have a few, like I said, I have a few archive shows, where one called Punch It: Writing in Star Trek, which is exactly what it sounds like, where we analyze the writing of Star Trek. And I have an older show, which I did with my wife, called Nerd Nuptial, where we talked about our relationship and how it relates to film, and we would analyze film and TV. And also, I just got done doing Lower Decks commentary tracks for Star Trek Lower Decks, and which is a show that I think if you're a Star Trek fan, you should check out, and then go listen to our commentaries, because it was a lot of fun to do.
Very cool. I'm going to have to listen to Nerd Nuptial too, because that sounds like a cool idea.
I really like doing it, and my wife and I really liked doing it together. I'm very proud of the work that we did on Nerd Nuptial, and we also, one thing that we talked about that I love to talk to people about is our baby story on the show. And we had issues with fertility, and we would talk about it. And we actually did a few episodes where we had to hold our kid, thankfully, while we were doing the show, and sometimes you'd hear, and her middle name is Ripley, who, named after Ripley from Alien and Aliens and everything like that. And yeah, we kind of got a little bit too busy with life in order to continue it on, but we still get emails from people saying if we're ever going to start it up again, and we are in the rumblings of doing something new. So yeah, please check it out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and of course, you can find me when I'm not here on 602 Club with Matt. I do a show with my friend Teresa Delgado called Sabers and Spells on the Skywalking Through Neverland Network, Skynet. And we talk about basically any other geeky stuff that we don't usually get to talk about. So that might be Stranger Things. She wanted to do a My Little Pony D&D game sometime soon. So we'll see what's next. And then I am available on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Twitter and Instagram at BestBenBell, and on Facebook I'll jump in the Babel conference from time to time.
Of course, you can find me all over the place, social media. Just look for Matt Rushing 02. You can find me here on the network doing Literary Treks as well as the Orb. Literary Treks is about the books and comics of Star Trek, and then the Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Of course, over on the Nerd Party Network with Tristan, but do two shows there. One is called Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, and each and every week we are talking about something fun in the Star Wars universe. So always a ton to talk about there. And then doing Owl Post, which is starting to wind down because we don't have many episodes left, with my friend Drea Kaufman, and that's where we're walking through Harry Potter each and every week, one chapter at a time. But you know what? Thank you guys so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.